Bet this guy couldn't handle real action, whispered the cocky new hire, watching Frank Morrison methodically check boarding passes at checkpoint 7. The other guards snickered. After all, what could a quiet 62-year-old security guard know about real danger? When a young Marine veteran overheard the conversation, he looked closer at Frank's bearing and realized those guards had no idea they were mocking a Green Beret master sergeant who'd seen more action than they could imagine. Terminal C at Denver International Airport buzzed with the usual morning chaos: flight delays, crying babies, business people clutching coffee like lifelines. At checkpoint 7, the rhythm was steady and professional, largely thanks to one man who'd been working the same station for 4 years. Frank Morrison stood with perfect posture, his navy blue TSA uniform pressed and crisp. At 62, his gray hair was cropped military short, his shoes polished to a shine that spoke of old habits that die hard. He processed each traveler with the same methodical precision, scanned the ID, checked the face, verify the boarding pass, move them along. Behind him, 3 younger guards clustered near the employee break area during a shift change. They thought they were speaking quietly, but their voices carried just enough. "Look at Robot Morrison over there," snickered Jake Patterson, 23 years old and 6 months into the job. "Dude acts like he's guarding Fort Knox instead of checking if Grandma has too much shampoo." The others laughed. Tyler Walsh, barely out of college, shook his head. "I swear the guy thinks he's some kind of super soldier. Like, bro, it's airport security, not Afghanistan." "Bet this guy couldn't handle real action," Jake continued, emboldened by the chuckles. "Probably never been in a real fight in his life. Just stands there all serious like he's protecting the president or something." Frank heard every word. His face remained impassive as he handed a boarding pass back to an elderly woman and wished her a safe flight. He'd learned long ago that some battles weren't worth fighting, especially not with people who couldn't understand what they were talking about. But someone else had heard the conversation too. Marcus Chen stood 3 people back in Frank's line, his jaw tightening as he listened to the guards mock a man they clearly didn't understand. Marcus was 26, 8 months out of the Marines after a medical discharge from an IED incident in Afghanistan. The titanium rod in his left leg ached constantly, and the partial hearing loss in his right ear was a daily reminder of his service. But his eyes worked just fine, and what he saw when he looked at Frank Morrison wasn't an overly serious security guard. It was a man whose bearing screamed military training at the highest levels. Marcus had served alongside enough special operations soldiers to recognize the signs. The way Frank held his shoulders, the systematic sweep of his eyes across the terminal, the economical precision of every movement. This wasn't someone playing soldier. This was someone who'd been forged by real experience in places where mistakes got people killed. As Marcus approached the checkpoint, his anger at the young guard's ignorance mixed with curiosity about the man they were mocking. When Frank checked his ID, Marcus saw something in the older man's eyes that confirmed his suspicion, a depth that came from carrying responsibilities most people couldn't imagine. "Thank you for your service," Marcus said quietly as Frank handed back his documents. Frank paused, his professional mask slipping slightly. "How did you know?" "Takes one to know one," Marcus replied. "Marine, 2nd Battalion." Frank nodded once, a gesture of recognition between warriors. "Army. Long time ago." Behind them, Jake Patterson was still entertaining his audience. "See? Now he's got some wannabe Marine thinking he's the real deal. These old guys love playing up the veteran angle for sympathy." Marcus's hands clenched involuntarily. Frank noticed and spoke quietly. "Let it go, son. They don't know what they don't know." But Marcus couldn't let it go, not when he recognized something in Frank Morrison that those immature guards would never understand. Marcus's flight to San Diego was delayed 3 hours due to weather. Instead of sitting at his gate brooding about the ignorant comments, he decided to observe Frank Morrison more carefully. He positioned himself at a coffee shop with a clear view of checkpoint 7 and watched Frank work. What he saw over the next 2 hours convinced him that the young guards weren't just wrong, they were dangerously clueless about who they were working alongside. Frank's routine wasn't just professional, it was tactical. The way he positioned himself to maintain sightlines to multiple exits, the way his eyes constantly swept the area behind travelers, checking for threats that TSA training manuals barely covered. The way he responded to sudden movements or raised voices with subtle shifts in posture that suggested muscle memory from situations far more dangerous than airport security. When a group of college students got rowdy in line, Frank didn't raise his voice or call for backup. He simply looked at them, a steady, calm gaze that somehow communicated absolute authority. The students quieted immediately, probably without even understanding why. Marcus had seen that look before. In Afghanistan, when his squad leader would scan a village crowd and somehow know which faces needed watching. In training, when drill instructors maintained order through pure presence and positioning. During Frank's break, Marcus watched him walk the terminal with purposeful steps. It wasn't casual wandering, it was a security patrol disguised as a coffee break. Frank checked corners, noted crowd patterns, observed potential vulnerabilities with the systematic thoroughness of someone who'd learned to think tactically about protecting people. Meanwhile, Jake Patterson and his buddies continued their commentary whenever Frank was within earshot. $20 says Morrison's never left Colorado, Tyler laughed during lunch break. Probably got all his military training from Call of Duty. Dude takes this job way too seriously, Jake added. Like, chill, bro, you're checking boarding passes, not hunting terrorists. Each comment made Marcus angrier, but also more determined to find out who Frank Morrison really was. That evening, he made some calls. Marcus had connections from his Marine service, guys who'd stayed in, moved to intelligence roles, or landed jobs in military contracting. It took 3 days and several carefully worded requests, but eventually he got a return call that changed everything. Chen, this is classified information, and I'm only sharing it because you indicated a potential security concern, his former intelligence officer said over an encrypted line. Frank Morrison, TSA employee at Denver International, Army service record, 26 years Special Forces, final rank, Master Sergeant, multiple classified deployments. Marcus sat down hard. Special Forces, Green Beret, the most elite soldiers in the U.S. Army. His decorations include a Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars, Purple Heart, and about a dozen other commendations I can't detail over the phone, the I.O. continued. This guy isn't just a veteran, he's a legend. Spent over 2 decades in places that don't exist on official maps, doing things that never made it into official reports. After hanging up, Marcus stared at his phone in disbelief. Frank Morrison wasn't just some overly serious security guard. He was one of the most elite warriors the country had ever produced, standing at an airport checkpoint while immature guards mocked him for taking his job seriously. The irony was staggering. Jake Patterson, who'd probably never been in a real fight, was making jokes about Frank's ability to handle real action. Tyler Walsh, whose biggest challenge was probably college finals, was questioning the credentials of a man who'd spent decades in the world's most dangerous places. Marcus realized he had to do something, not to embarrass the young guards, but to make sure they understood the magnitude of their disrespect. A week later, Marcus flew back through Denver specifically to see Frank again. This time, he came prepared. He waited until Jake Patterson and Tyler Walsh were working the adjacent checkpoint, close enough to overhear conversation. When Marcus reached Frank's station, he spoke clearly, but not loudly. Master Sergeant Morrison, thank you for your continued service. Frank's eyes widened slightly. How did you... I did some research, Marcus said. 26 years, Army Special Forces, Silver Star, Bronze Stars, Purple Heart, the works. The conversation carried just far enough. Marcus saw Jake's head turn, confusion creeping across his face. Frank handed back Marcus's documents, his professional composure intact, but clearly uncomfortable with the public recognition. That was a long time ago. Not that long, Marcus replied. And some training never leaves you. These travelers have no idea how safe they are with you watching over them. Jake Patterson had stopped processing his own line and was openly staring now. Tyler Walsh looked confused, glancing between Frank and Marcus as if trying to process information that didn't fit their narrative. "Is there a problem with your line, Patterson?" Frank asked calmly, noticing the disruption. "No, sir," Jake replied automatically, the "sir" slipping out before he could stop it. Marcus moved through security, but the damage to the guard's ignorant confidence was already done. Word spread quickly through the TSA staff. By the end of the shift, everyone knew that the man they'd been calling Robot Morrison was actually a decorated Special Forces veteran whose military record was largely classified. The atmosphere around Checkpoint 7 changed overnight. The casual disrespect and mocking comments stopped immediately. Jake Patterson, who'd led the mockery, could barely make eye contact with Frank for days. But the real change came when Tyler Walsh approached Frank during a break 3 days later. "Master Sergeant Morrison." Tyler's voice was hesitant, embarrassed. Could I talk to you for a minute?" Frank looked up from the security manual he was reading. "It's just Frank, and yes." Tyler sat down heavily. "I owe you an apology. A big one. We had no idea. We were complete jerks." Frank closed the manual. "You were young men talking. It happens." "No, it wasn't just talking. We were disrespecting someone who'd earned more respect than we could ever understand. Jake feels terrible too. We both do." Frank studied the young man for a moment. Tyler was maybe 22, probably never been more than 100 miles from home, never faced anything more dangerous than an angry customer. "You want to know what real action looks like?" Frank asked quietly. Tyler nodded eagerly. "It's not what you see in movies. It's not exciting or glamorous. Real action is being responsible for other people's lives, making decisions where failure means people don't come home. It's carrying that weight every day, long after the uniforms come off." He paused, looking at Tyler with eyes that had seen things the young man couldn't imagine. "The job you're doing now? Protecting travelers, maintaining security, keeping people safe? That's real action too. It's just a different kind of battlefield." Tyler absorbed this, his perspective shifting in real time. "Will you teach us? Not classified stuff, but how to do this job better." Frank considered the request. "What makes you think you need teaching?" "Because in 1 week you've processed twice as many passengers as any of us, with 0 complaints and 0 security incidents. Jake timed your ID checks. You're 30% faster than the rest of us while being twice as thorough. Whatever you know, we need to learn it." Over the following weeks, Frank quietly began sharing his knowledge. Not classified information or specific military tactics, but the fundamental principles that made him so effective: situational awareness, threat assessment, efficient communication, professional bearing. He taught them how to read body language, how to de-escalate tension, how to maintain security without creating friction. Simple techniques that improved their performance and made the entire checkpoint more effective. Jake Patterson, the former ringleader of mockery, became Frank's most dedicated student. The transformation was remarkable. From a cocky kid who thought security work was beneath him to a professional who understood that protecting people was a privilege, not a burden. "I can't believe we made fun of you," Jake said one day during training. You could have been doing consulting work, corporate security, training contracts. Instead, you're here, doing this job, teaching us." Frank adjusted Jake's stance during a situational awareness exercise. "Someone has to stand watch. Location doesn't matter. Mission doesn't change. But why here? Why this job?" Frank paused, looking out at the stream of travelers passing through security. Families heading on vacation, business people trying to make a living, soldiers in civilian clothes going home or deploying. In Special Forces, the mission was always about protecting something bigger than yourself. Your team, your country, people who couldn't protect themselves. When I retired, I tried jobs that paid more, had better titles, more prestige, but they didn't have purpose. He gestured toward the checkpoint. This job has purpose. Every day I protect thousands of travelers. The mission is real, even if it looks different than what I used to do. Tyler Walsh, who'd been listening, spoke up. How do we make sure we never disrespect someone like that again? Frank looked at both young men. You assume everyone has a story worth respecting until they prove otherwise. The janitor might be a former surgeon, the bus driver might be a former teacher, the security guard might be a former soldier. Don't judge people by their current circumstances. Judge them by how they handle those circumstances. Word of Frank's background and his training sessions spread throughout the airport. Other departments began requesting his input on security procedures. His shift became the most efficient in the terminal, with the lowest complaint rate and highest passenger satisfaction scores. But Frank remained modest about his influence. When the terminal manager offered him a promotion to supervisor, he declined. I like working the line, he explained. That's where the real mission happens. Marcus Chen returned to Denver 3 months later for another connecting flight. The change in atmosphere around Checkpoint 7 was immediately apparent. The guards moved with more purpose, communicated more professionally, and worked with obvious respect for their colleague. When Marcus reached Frank's station, the older man smiled, a genuine expression that seemed more frequent now. How's the new crew working out? Marcus asked. They're learning, Frank replied. Good kids, just needed proper guidance. And the disrespect? Frank's expression grew thoughtful. Sometimes people need to be reminded that everyone they meet is fighting a battle they know nothing about. Once they understood that, everything changed. As Marcus moved through security, he noticed Jake Patterson at the adjacent checkpoint. The young man who'd once mocked Frank was now processing travelers with the same systematic efficiency, the same professional bearing, the same quiet competence. Frank Morrison hadn't just improved airport security. He'd transformed the people responsible for it. 6 months after the initial confrontation, Denver International's Terminal C security operation had become a model for other airports. Complaint rates had dropped 40%, processing times had improved 25%, and employee satisfaction scores had reached the highest levels in the facility's history. When a Department of Homeland Security assessment team visited to study the improvement, they found something unexpected. A culture of professional excellence built around the quiet leadership of a TSA officer who'd never sought recognition or promotion. Morrison's influence on operational efficiency is remarkable, the lead assessor noted in her report. His techniques should be implemented system-wide. But when they offered Frank a position developing training programs for TSA facilities nationwide, he politely declined. This is where I'm needed, he said simply. The young guards who'd once mocked him now competed to work his shifts. Jake Patterson had applied for law enforcement training, inspired by Frank's example. Tyler Walsh was studying criminal justice at night school, planning to make security work his career. Master Sergeant Morrison changed my whole perspective, Tyler told the assessment team. I thought this job was just something you did until something better came along. He showed us it's a mission worth doing well. Frank never discussed his military record with them in detail. He didn't need to. His example spoke louder than any war story could. 2 years later, Frank Morrison still stood at Checkpoint 7 every morning, arriving exactly 15 minutes early, conducting his duties with the same systematic excellence that had defined his entire career. The mockery was a distant memory, replaced by respect that extended throughout the terminal. New employees learned quickly that the quiet older guard wasn't just another TSA officer, He was a teacher, a mentor, and a reminder that true professionalism was about how you approached any mission, not just the prestigious ones. Marcus Chen, now working as a veterans advocate in Denver, occasionally flew through the airport just to see Frank in action. What he witnessed never failed to impress him. A decorated Special Forces veteran who'd found new purpose in civilian service, still protecting people, still standing watch, still making a difference. During one visit, Marcus asked Frank if he ever missed the complexity and importance of his military missions. Frank looked out at the terminal full of travelers, families reuniting, business people pursuing opportunities, students heading to new adventures, and shook his head. Every person who gets on a plane safely, every family that travels without incident, every threat we identify and neutralize before it becomes a problem, that's the mission now. It's not less important, just different. He paused, watching Jake Patterson efficiently process a line of passengers with techniques Frank had taught him. Besides, I'm not just protecting travelers anymore. I'm training the next generation of people who'll protect them. The mission multiplies. Frank Morrison never wrote a book about his military service, never gave interviews about his classified missions, never sought recognition for transforming airport security culture through quiet excellence. He simply continued to serve, one shift at a time, one traveler at a time, one student at a time. Because for some men, the mission never ends. It just evolves into new forms of honor and purpose. The young guards who'd once questioned whether he could handle real action now understood that he'd been handling real action all along. They'd just been too inexperienced to recognize what dedication looked like when it wore a civilian uniform. In the end, Master Sergeant Frank Morrison, U.S. Army Special Forces, retired, proved that true warriors don't stop serving when they change uniforms. They find new ways to protect, new people to teach, new missions to accomplish with the same honor and dedication they brought to the battlefield. And sometimes, if you're lucky enough to recognize them, they teach you that respect isn't earned through bragging or posturing. It's earned through quiet competence, professional excellence, and the kind of character that shines brightest when nobody's watching.